On the morning of October 3rd, 2002, a small plane fell out of the sky over Lewisville, Texas. The engine was fine. The wings were fine. The pilot had simply lost control 4,000 feet up, with no runway, no options, and about 90 seconds to live. He pulled a red handle above his head, and the entire airplane, engine, wings, pilot, all of it floated to the ground under a parachute the size of a house. He walked away. That was the first time in history a certified aircraft parachute saved a life. It has now done it more than 140 times. So here's the question nobody at the airline wants you to ask. If we can hang a parachute on a whole airplane, if it works, if it's real, if it's been saving lives for over 20 years, then why isn't there one strapped to the 180-ton jet you'll board this summer? You already sense the answer is it's too heavy. You're right. And you're also about to find out that too heavy hides something far stranger. Quick detour, because you need to meet the people who actually think about this. Every time this question goes viral online, the comment section splits into two tribes. Tribe 1, just give everyone a parachute. Tribe 2, usually one exhausted skydiving instructor with 6,000 jumps, replying, please, I am begging you, no. And the instructor is right, but not for the reason you'd guess. Picture it. Row 34. The plane is going down. A flight attendant is calmly explaining how to attach a harness to a man who has never in his life touched anything more athletic than an armrest. The person behind him is already trying to open the door, which, as we'll see, is physically impossible. But he doesn't know that yet because he skipped the safety briefing to watch a movie. Now multiply that man by 300. Give them all a parachute. Give them all 4 minutes. There's an old dark joke that floats up in these threads every time. No survivors means no lawsuits. Grim. Also, I'd hold that thought. Because by the end of this, you'll understand why the joke is closer to the real reason than the physics is. All right. Back to the top of the descent. October 3rd, 2002, Lewisville, Texas. The man with the red handle was flying a Cirrus SR22. And Cirrus had done something the entire aviation industry called insane. They'd built a rocket-deployed parachute into the airframe of every plane they sold. The system has a name, CAPS, the Cirrus Airframe Parachute System. Pull the handle, a solid fuel rocket fires through a panel behind the cabin, and it drags out a canopy engineered to lower the whole aircraft at a survivable speed. The industry laughed. Real pilots don't need a parachute, they said. Real pilots fly the plane down. Then the saves started 1, then 10, then 50. As of today, over 140 people are alive who, by every reasonable measure, should not be. Cirrus became one of the best-selling small aircraft on Earth. The parachute wasn't a gimmick, it was a feature people paid extra to have above their heads. So the concept is proven, a parachute can lower an intact aircraft to the ground. That's not science fiction, that's a Tuesday in general aviation. Which brings us to the obvious next step. If it works on a 4-seat Cirrus, scale it up. Put it on the 737, right? This is exactly where thousands of people land when they think it through. And one of them, in a comment that's been liked over 7,000 times, asked precisely this. Why not a parachute for the whole plane? Not for the passengers, for the plane. It's the right question, it's the smart question. And to see why it collapses, we have to do the one thing that viral comment thread actually did, the math. Start with what we know works. A single-person round parachute is about 30 feet across and lowers maybe 220 pounds. A Cirrus SR22, fully loaded, weighs about 3,600 pounds. Its parachute is roughly 55 feet across, so going from one person to a small plane, 16 times the weight, already needs a canopy nearly double the width. Parachute area doesn't scale politely, it scales brutally. Now a Boeing 737, empty, it's around 90,000 pounds. Loaded, closer to 170,000. That's not 16 times a skydiver. It's roughly 800 times. Here's the part that hurts. To lower that weight gently, you don't need a parachute 800 times bigger in one direction. Because a canopy is a surface, area grows with the square of the width. Run the numbers, and a single canopy for a loaded 737 would need to be on the order of thousands of feet across, wider than the airport it's trying to reach. A commenter did this exact calculation and reached the same wall. The planes are simply too heavy for the fabric to catch them. But And this is where it gets interesting. Engineers don't give up at one giant chute won't work. They cluster them, several smaller canopies instead of one impossible one. That's how NASA landed multi-ton space capsules. 3 chutes, not 1. So could you? In theory, yes. And here the dream starts to feel real again. And then reality quietly closes 3 doors, one after another. Door 1, the speed. A parachute can't open above roughly 150 miles an hour without shredding. A jetliner cruises at over 500, so you can only deploy in a slow, controlled descent, which is exactly the situation where the pilots could probably just land the plane. In a true high-speed catastrophe, the moment you'd need it most, the fabric tears itself apart. Door 2, the weight you added. Every pound of parachute, rocket, and reinforced structure is a pound of paying passenger or cargo you no longer carry. On every flight, for the entire 30-year life of the aircraft, on a system that will almost certainly never be used once. Door 3 is the one that changes the whole story, and it's not about physics at all, because here's what the "it's too heavy" answer conveniently skips. Cirrus proved you can build survivable systems. The reason it stops at 4-seat planes and never climbs to the 737 isn't a law of physics. It's a decision, a calculated one. And once you see how the calculation is made, you can't unsee it. Airlines and manufacturers run a number on every safety feature. Cost of adding it, times every plane, times every flight, for decades, against lives statistically saved. And a full aircraft parachute loses that math in a landslide for a reason that sounds almost too bleak to say out loud. Commercial aviation is already astonishingly safe. Your odds of dying on a given flight are somewhere around 1 in 11 million. You are genuinely in more danger driving to the airport than in anything the flight will do to you. When the baseline is that safe, a billion-dollar system that might save a handful of people in the rare survivable crash, while adding weight and risk to every single flight, never clears the bar. And now that grim comment comes back around. No survivors means no lawsuits. People say it as gallows humor, but flip it. The industry's real conclusion is that the cheapest, most reliable safety strategy isn't surviving the crash. It's making the crash so rare it effectively doesn't happen. Redundant engines, triplicated computers, obsessive maintenance, pilots trained for failures you'll never hear about because they were handled at 35,000 feet while you watched a movie. They didn't put a parachute on your plane. They spent that money making sure you'd never need one. That is the actual answer. Not too heavy. Prevention beats rescue, every time, on every spreadsheet, which leaves one door still standing open. If a controlled, slow descent is the only time a chute could work, that's also the exact moment a modern jet can glide. Engines dead, both of them, and a 737 becomes a heavy glider that can travel over 100 miles looking for a runway. It has happened. A fully loaded jet lost both engines over the Atlantic and glided to a landing with everyone alive. The best whole aircraft parachute ever designed is the wing you're already sitting behind. So, a plane already has a parachute, a red handle, a rocket, a canopy the size of a house, and more than 140 people who are alive to tell you it works. It just stops at the small ones. Not because the fabric can't be sewn bigger, but because somewhere in a building you'll never visit, someone decided that the safest thing they could hang over your head wasn't silk. It was a second engine, a backup computer, a pilot rehearsing a failure you will never witness, and a statistic so lopsided that the parachute, the obvious, intuitive, life-saving parachute, becomes the one thing that would make your flight more dangerous, not less. The man in Lewisville pulled the handle because he had nothing else. You'll never reach for one. And that, strange as it sounds, is the whole point. Next time you're wedged in 34B wondering why there's a life vest under your seat for an ocean you'll never ditch in, but no parachute for the fall you're actually afraid of. Now you know. They didn't forget. They calculated. And the answer they got was that the best parachute money can buy is the one you never ever have to use.